Welcome to Media in the Mix, the only podcast produced and hosted by the School of Communication at American University. Join us as we create a safe space to explore topics and communication at the intersection of social justice, tech, innovation, and pop culture. All right, welcome back to Media in the Mix. Today we have Pallavi and Isis. Thank you so much for being here and joining us on the episode. So we have Isis Amusa, who's a senior at AU. You're double majoring in journalism and justice and law, which is very cool. Also the creative strategist for SOC3, which we're going to dive very deep into today. And we have Pallavi Kumar, who is the Hearst Senior Professorial Lecturer and the SOC3 Faculty Director, as well as an SOC alumni. So back at AU, which is very exciting. First and foremost, we're very excited to have you. I want to start with our SOC alumni. What brought you back to AU? Can you just kind of give us like a little deep dive into what you graduated with and kind of your journey back to SOC?
Of course, and thanks for having both me and Isis Grace. We are excited to be here and to talk about SOC3. So I graduated in 1994. I was actually the first class of SOC as an independent school, and I was a double major. We used to call it public communication, the degree then, now it's PR and strategic communication, as well as a CLEG major in SPA. And I actually came to AU, like every bright-eyed, person saying, oh, I want to work on the Hill, and, took some poli-sci classes and sort of pivoted, found this as a double major and just realized that it was everything I wanted to do with my career. And so I was really lucky that I, worked in New York and in DC and in Philadelphia for years in the professional world, but I always wanted to teach at AU. And so when my family and I relocated to DC, I started teaching as an adjunct. I was only 27 years old.
Wow.
And now I've been teaching here. I joined the faculty full-time in 2009, and I've been teaching for 21 years.
Wow. And what was the class you were teaching as an adjunct professor?
So I used to teach Com 301, which was our intro to PR class. I still teach that class every now and then, but of course I've added so many new classes to the curriculum.
Yeah.
And when I joined full-time in 2009, I also then became the division director for 8 years in 2012 to 2020. So, being able to not just teach at my alma mater, but to lead the program, all of that came to the creation of SOC3 because it's all those experiences that I had in the professional world with students and then running our division that I kind of got this leadership experience and said, I think something's missing. I think we have to do something a little bit more innovative within the school.
That's very cool. And we'll get back to that actually, because I have a question on the innovation of SOC3. But Isis, I want to ask you, so what appealed to you about SOC3? And can you kind of just give the students a little look into what the process is like? So becoming the creative strategist, like, do you take this class and then you have to apply for that position? Can you just give us a little background there?
Yeah, of course. So I first learned about this class from someone who's in the last cohort, Sarah, and she told me about it. I hadn't heard of it. I hadn't seen it. And I was like, wow, what is this experience? Like an experiential learning course, working with a real client, and getting paid, which is nice, of course. And so I looked it up and I found a flyer that was made, and I just got really invested because, as you said, I am a journalism major, but I'm no longer pursuing journalism anymore, but I am still pursuing storytelling, pursuing creative work, and I'm kind of interested in working with real-world nonprofit clients, particularly in food justice. And so this is really a great intersection of my interests, I think. And so once I found this course, I was just extremely excited. And so I applied, I got in, and then we spent the first about couple weeks or so brainstorming roles because we really wanted to kind of centralize some of our work, and it was a little disorganized last semester. So we made these different teams, and based on our interest and our skill set, that's how I became the creative strategist.
That's very cool. And just one thing, you said food justice?
Yes.
Can you give me a little background on that?
Yeah, so food justice, in my opinion, is at least the belief that food is a fundamental right for all human beings.
Love that.
So I work particularly in Black food justice because Black communities disproportionately experience something called food apartheid, which is basically this idea that the quality of food is segregated just like many other systems in this country. And so I work currently as a communications contractor with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, doing very similar work that I do at SOC3.
That's wonderful. Good for you.
Yeah,
That's
thank
great.
you. I mean, and last semester we worked on that very issue with DC Central
Yeah,
Kitchen.
I was going
exactly.
to say that
Exactly.
that client must have appealed to you as
Yeah,
well, because
yeah.
that's right up your alley.
Mhm.
That's awesome. And
Yes.
I will say I was actually there filming SOC3 when they had the presentations for the DC Food Kitchen, and I was blown away at the work that goes into what the students were doing and the packages that they were creating for these clients. And coming from like a PR background, the first part of my career, I was so impressed that they are getting that real world experience, which we'll get into in a sec. And then also just to ask you, kind of leading into our next question, how has this kind of aided you in your real world experience? So it's not just, and we're kind of repeat this later on, but it's not just your traditional classroom setting, right? So as a student, and I also want to hear the point of view of a professor, how has that kind of aided in your just experience as a whole, whether it be teaching or learning?
Right. Yeah, I think experiential learning is incredibly powerful. I think kind of by nature, as a journalism major, I've gotten experiential learning because you have to talk to people and you have to go out in the real world in order to write stories. But in this context, I haven't had as much experience. And so the ability to work with a real client and adapt to their schedule, adapt to their needs, and be flexible in that way, I think is really useful. And I think it's a skill set that all students need.
That's great. Yeah. And what about from the teacher side of it?
So, we don't like to call SOC3 a class because it's so much more than that. But it is in a classroom. Storytelling for Changemakers is the signature curriculum experience. And part of the reason why I designed it that way is because we're in Washington, D.C. So our students are, they're out in the world. There's so many things that they're doing. They're interning at the White House. They're interning at the Washington Post. They're getting all this experience. And so, there's some student, powered agencies in different universities where it's a volunteer thing. It's like a club.
Yeah.
And I just knew that wouldn't work because one, our students, it has to work for all kinds of students. That's one of, equity is a huge part of SOC3. So one, not everybody has time to just volunteer, right? So the fact that it has to be credit-based, that was really important to me. It did have to be in that setting because there's also that guarantee that you're going to see people, they're going to give the commitment to that. So that's why it's in, the class is sort of structured that way. And then of course, as you said, the students are also getting paid to help run the agency. So I do feel like it is designed with equity in mind. And that's the reason why it is, in a classroom.
Can you give us an idea into what your
elevator
pitch was? Like, what was that initial, started to take its course?
Okay, so probably about 5 years ago, we were at a brainstorm. It was leadership brainstorm at the Mexican Cultural Institute. And we just were talking about the fact that the School of Communication at American University is so unique in that we have film students and we have journalism students, we have communication studies, and we have PR students. And it's not a lot of schools that will have those particular majors all housed in one sort of, place. And we felt like we weren't taking advantage of the fact that we have these incredibly talented students, but they're not getting the chance to actually take classes together and to have experiential learning opportunities together. So we knew the separate majors offered different things, but to put them all in an integrated setting, that just didn't exist. Mm-hmm. The other part of that was the fact that the world is changing. And so, if you're going to any type of creative agency, you don't have just X major. You have people from all different kinds of backgrounds. And so we really felt like that would be a really cool thing to do. Now, I was lucky in the sense that I got to do a lot of experimenting before launching SOC3. I did an application-based PR agency class. I did a diversity fellowship. We did a 24-hour RFP challenge where students had just 24, so I tried many, many different types of things to see like summer versus internship versus this versus that. And all of that experimentation, years of experimentation actually, really led to the fact that, I honed in on this idea that it should be a class, that it should be paid, and that it, that it was going to be a semester-long sort of, project that would, change over with a new set of students. Right. And so all of that kind of came just because of the experimentation, and that's what led to the launch. And also I think COVID helped because I think previously we were thinking, we need a physical space and we need all of these things, which means you need to raise more money. And we realized, you don't really need any of that stuff. The work that the student, that's the most important thing. And the work is as you said, it's amazing.
It's so wonderful. Exactly. It really was. And we'll get into the DC Food Kitchen in a second. Isis, what you said about kind of, I'm not a journalism major anymore, I'm still practicing journalism.
Yeah.
Like, that's so true. And I thought I wanted to be a journalist as well. Now I realize, like, storytelling is journalism. Like, that's,
Exactly.
There's so many things that overlap, which is great. If the students are listening to this episode, I want them to know what went into it. What was the client? What did the students get to do for the client? I really want them to understand that real world experience that they get. So can you dive into that?
Last semester it was, oh my goodness. I mean, so, all summer long I was working with, so we have a wonderful donor, Michael Kempner. He's the CEO of MWW. He's a Board of Trustees member, and he's an AU alum. And he's really the reason why SOC3 even exists, because it's his support, it's his funding, and it's really all that experimentation that I talked about, that was all with him. That he provided us the initial seed money to kind of figure out what it is that we wanted to do. And then when we had the bigger idea of SOC3, that he was on board to, help to fund it. So that part was, all key. But, all summer long, I was kind of working as a solo person, but with his team in New York. I went up to New York. We had a brainstorm with his brand strategy team, all of that, the logo, the website, all of that stuff came together in the summer. But then we entered the classroom, and it's like, oh my goodness, this whole thing that has been living in my brain for years was an actual thing. And somebody wrote in a final reflection paper, like, it was, welcome to SOC3. It was a note to future cohorts like ISIS, like, welcome to this like wonderful mess. And I thought that was just such a great characterization, because it was. Last semester, it definitely was a mess, because again, we didn't even launch until October. So the first 6 weeks of the semester was like, what are we like even doing? Like, we didn't have any social channels, any of that. So all of that stuff was happening at the same time that we were working with DC Central Kitchen, our first client. So it was an overwhelming amount of work, but I will say, and I was really nervous about the experience the students were having, because again, it was an experiment, things changed a lot. But when I read the final reflection papers, I mean, like, my heart was just like full. Like, it was like the students, what they wrote and the experience that they had, and they just said, like, they couldn't have been more grateful. And so that to me was like, okay, this was a ton of work. It's going to continue to be a ton of work, but it's so worth it, because to have students to have that reaction after just one semester. And like Isis, I always say this to our current cohort, like, oh my gosh, it's so much better. We're so much more organized now. But, that experience, we kind of had to start that way. You just had to start, right? Yeah. And we did. And I think I couldn't have been happier.
So Isis, and what are some responsibilities you have as a creative strategist?
So as creative strategists, we basically defined ourselves as the curators of the public face of SOC3. So we're really in charge of the website. Currently, we all in a cohort work on the social media, but assist with that as well. And we're working on creating a case study right now on the website to document all the projects that we created for DC Central Kitchen. And so basically our responsibility is to ensure that when people learn about SOC3, there's something nice and put together and organized for them to look at and to be able to understand what it is that we do.
It's really cool. And what are some other positions, like any other positions that you work with, that you're working closely with, or just give us an idea of like other things available?
Yeah, so currently we'll be collaborating with the community engagement directors to work on a newsletter later this semester, which will summarize all of the things that we've been working on, and people will get to see kind of a sneak peek into what we've been doing. There's also the brand development directors who really focus on kind of attracting new clients, and we're especially really interested in attracting corporate clientele and name brand clientele eventually. So that's kind of what we're building towards. And what are the other positions?
We have a research analyst.
Very cool.
Yeah, and that's a great, that's a new position as well. But what's nice about the research analysts, they're too, they are looking ahead always. So, for instance, we're doing a brainstorm for our other client next week, but they've already laid the groundwork, done the research for that, so that now as we go into that, all the information is there.
And in a dream world, are there any other positions you'd like to make available?
So we do have one more set of positions, which we're still kind of figuring out. And this is, I think, the growing pains that comes with growing is we have what we're calling agency directors. We have 3 people on that team. And their job is to kind of help run everything. So this semester, we're much more automated. We have a Google form for a social post. We have monthly timesheets that the students are doing. There's a Slack channel. So we're using kind of more of the tools out there, I guess you would say, in the corporate world to some extent. But they're supposed to kind of be running the mess. But the problem is that I'm the log jam, right? So, and I'm a difficult client to work with in that sense, because I'm always like, everything is in my brain and there's only so much that I can do. So it just also speaks to the need for SOC3 to really grow and to become what we want it to be. We'll need more funding. We do need our alumni to step up and bring us clients and, donate to us. We're going to establish a board of advisors. That's part of what the brand development directors are working on, is our prospect list. We've done a lot of soft touch outreach this semester. We're getting CEOs to come in and, we're really bringing SOC3 out into the world. But part of the reason is we want people to fall in love with us so that they will hire us, they will hire the students, and that they will give us funding. Because, I said this in a school of communication internal meeting, philanthropy matters. And SOC3's goals are to help diversify the communications industry. Last semester, the cohort was 61% diverse. This semester, 51% diverse. But that's our goal, is at least 50%, or ideally more, of course. We want what the cohort looks like is what the comms world should look like, and it doesn't. And so I see the photos of our cohort and the work they're doing, and I'm like, that's representation that I want to see happen in the industry. And so that's part of why SOC3 exists. It gives the experience, has the students, get paid, but I also want these students to realize that I don't just want them to be in the comms industry. I want them to lead the comms industry. And too many times I've seen students, particularly students of color, who might enter into the sort of traditional, route that communications people enter, and then they become disenchanted. If you don't have people that look like you out in the world, it's really a hard situation. And I'm a woman of color. I've been in the comms industry for 30 years. I've experienced that, and I hate it. And I want this generation. And they should, and there's no excuse to why the comms industry does not look like the world, because you can't lead these campaigns on behalf of people when you're not representing those people. And so that's a lot of what we're trying to do now. So, and that's why I think getting funding is so important, but at the same time, that's what makes us so attractive, because who doesn't want to invest in Gen Z, a diverse Gen Z, who is going to help to lead the comms industry?
And I think it's so true when you also don't have, which why it puts you in such a great position, is when you don't have someone like you vouching for you. It's like there's just kind of a miscommunication there sometimes. So I really like that. And I also like this fostering of the students working together, and then getting a sense of that as well, because you're just constantly going to meet new people in this industry. You're constantly going to meet different kinds of people. And the funny part is that everyone works in a different way. So it's like if you have an office that has one SOP, standard operating procedure, and then you go to another production office, it could be completely different, at least in our sense. So I think that's great experience to get them to just kind of like understand how people work and come across different types of people. And it's just such a valuable lesson.
I think that's why the team format works, of everybody having the different teams that they're working in, because they're collaborating and then working on client work together as teams as well. So they're constantly learning about team communication, and also that's a leadership skill as well.
Yeah. And it's just a good lesson to know that, like, if you want something to happen, you can absolutely create it and do it yourself. I think that's, which I know the industry is actually moving away from a little bit, which I'm very happy to see. But you usually kind of have this like hierarchy of like, you have to start here, and then you have to be here, and then you have to be, you cannot skip any of the, don't think you could skip those, know, and it's like, for some things, sure, there really is like a blueprint that you have to follow. But for other things, in terms of innovation and creating an inclusive environment, diverse, not in terms of just race or just everything, different positions, whatever it may be. I love that kind of fosters that, because we need more of that in this industry. People feeling like they can go ahead and lead, without someone kind of pushing you down. It's a good segue into this, one of our last questions, which is the challenges that you face. And that can be anything big or small, just communication, or really anything.
I'll have ISIS
with the irony
first.
of it, right?
Yeah.
Is there communication problems?
Challenges. There have been a couple, specifically on my team, I'll say, but we had a early disagreement, and there was just some miscommunication, and we had to work it out, but ultimately it was resolved. And I think that so far we've all just been learning, like you said, each other's work styles and how we all work and mesh together as a team. But for the most part, we get along really well, and I think we all really like each other. Like at the tabling event today, we had a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I don't know about this cohort, because we haven't been able to watch you guys in action, but I know the last cohort, they all really seemed to it was such a collaborative environment, and everyone seemed to be helping everybody, and everyone was learning from everybody. And it was really cool to see all the different types of presentations when they finally did their, client presentations, because you could tell that every group had their own like unique factor, and it was
Yeah.
just so different, and they were bringing a different thing to the table, which is awesome.
I mean, this semester I'll say that this cohort is just I've not had like any team issues at all, which, you know, in group work it's natural for that to happen. But there is, so one thing that the previous cohort said is there wasn't enough bonding, and that's just because of the fact that we were just go trying to launch and do everything. So I tried to leave more time for bonding. I will say we haven't done a great job yet because we're always so busy. But at the same time, we've had great experiences. So the Students' Day, we did they did some field research this semester. So they went and we talked to the director of the humanities truck. We got to go in the truck. That was a really fun experience for all of us to be together. And then they went out for our DC's Bridge Park. The 11th Street Bridge Project is one of our clients this semester. So they went out into Anacostia, and we are helping to launch their small business kiosk. And so the idea is that they have this we're coming up with a better name, which we've actually given them even name ideas. We did a brainstorm for them. But they're going to be taking this traveling sort of kiosk out throughout the city for the next 2 years, promoting all the businesses on Good Hope Road and at Anacostia to get people familiar so that when this bridge project does open up, their whole point is they want to lift communities up. They don't want to push them out. And so this is part of their equitable development program, which fits, I mean, their mission and what they're doing fits so much in line with what SOC3 is doing. And so the field research day, I know Isis and her team, they spent the whole day, they ate like all the food that was out in the Anacostia Arts Center, and they had a great time.
Yeah, I was going to say that we definitely bonded that day. We just decided to turn it into a whole, like, I think it's Valentine's Day actually. So we're like, this is our Galentine's Day trip. And yeah, we went to a few restaurants, we walked around, and it was a lot of many of the members in our cohort have never been to Anacostia before, so it was just a really cool experience to all experience that together.
That's great.
And I mean, AU's strategic imperative is, you know, one of them is, you know, to work with DC, and like that's exactly what SOC3 is doing. It's not just working, but also like pretty high profile clients we have, and seeing the students get to go out into the field. I think that's just so important.
That's awesome. So I'll leave you with this question. So to expand SOC in your dream world, in your perfect world, is there something that you want to add, that you want to do? Can be anything.
Yes. Well, I want obviously more funding. That's definitely critical because, you know, as I said to somebody, I said, I'm like the new business developer, the, you know, executive director, you know, the faculty member. I'm doing kind of the work that we would have more people helping. So I think more funding would help us expand. And I think that would be great. I also think having a board of advisors is just key because again, right now it can't be any one person's vision. We need a collective vision. So having kind of that level involved will be great also for the cohorts because then they'll have obviously senior people to interact with and to get advice from. And, you know, those people will be invested in the students and American University.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah. One thing that we talked about today that doesn't exist yet just because of its nature is creating an alumni network so that every future cohort of SOC3 can talk to former students and we'll all be hopefully out in the profession, you know. So I'm excited to make those connections and possibly mentor someone. And yeah, exactly. And obviously the funding, yes, that'd be amazing.
Your own mentorship program within,
Can I just add a little?
Yeah, of course.
So last week we had a meet and greet with Michael Kempner, who's, as we said, our founding donor, and we invited the previous cohort to come as well. And from that, I got, of course, emails. And the previous cohort, they still want to be part of SOC3, and I've never experienced that. I've been teaching for 21 years. I've never had they want to come visit. Michael was kind enough to say, okay, I'm funding sweatshirts for them too because they didn't get sweatshirts, they only got T-shirts. So and just this is cool, right? And so the fact that you have previous alums that want to be involved, and obviously we're going to be recruiting for the fall 2023 cohort, so you're going to see a lot about that. But we're going to have in just under a year, we're going to have alums, and there are alums that want to be involved, and I think that's really cool. So we're actually doing our first ever keynote end of the year ceremony where we're going to be giving our SOC3 alums who are seniors. They're going to get graduation stoles, and we have the chairman emeritus of Ketchum, Rob Flaherty, who's going to come and give the keynote, address. And he was a first-generation college student, and he went on to become the chairman of this, worldwide agency. And I think that, again, harkens back to that message of you're not just working, you're leaders. And so exposing our students to these types of leaders is really important as well.
It really, like, these clients must be so impressed with your work. It's truly, because I imagine I'm on the other side of that, and like a group of students, which that, you know, at first that's all they know, right? It's a group of students. It's like, okay. And then to see what they can do is like, wow.
Well, I'll just give you one quick example. So last semester with DC Central Kitchen, as you saw, so there were 5 different groups presenting, which is quite a lot. But they said every group gave at least one actionable idea that they would use.
Wow.
And within 2 weeks, the app redesign team had done a complete redesign of their Healthy Corners app. And within 2 weeks, they adopted the changes. And so that's the type of, like, again, I've been teaching a long time. I've had clients work with different classes before. To see that level of adoption just that quickly was really, really gratifying.
And people have to understand that's 5 different ideas. That's like 5 groups. That's a lot of ideas.
It's a lot. And it's not, in the, you know, the one thing I do want to talk about just for a quick second is that SOC3 is not a PR agency. I've even heard, you know, President Burwell call it that. It's not. It's an integrated creative agency. We're not doing anything that has happened before because whatever the students will use design thinking. So whatever they're coming up with, they start from field research, creating empathy, and then design prototypes. I don't know what those are ever going to be. They don't know what they're going to be. It's based on brainstorm and discussion, and they're all different. Every semester, it's different. Whatever they create, it's storytelling. Storytelling can change the world. That's exactly what they're doing.
And research. I mean, they really put time into being like, this is what we found from the research or from the data we've gotten.
In the mindset of who the target audience is.
It's very impressive. They were like checking off a lot of skills that are just so valuable that you really don't get unless someone kind of puts you on a project like that, to be honest. So.
Exactly. So it is, I just want to dispel that myth that it is not a PR agency. No, that's true.
And you kind of changed my mind, admittedly, because hearing all of the different, you know, comms that go into it.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, there was a prototype product last semester. You don't create products ever, right? So that was, again, just from the storytelling perspective.
Really cool,
exactly, snackables. That was the thing that they created.
We loved the snackables. We were like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. That's so crazy.
It was like, and to me, that's what makes it so exciting and different. You know, is, you know, as I enter my like 5th decade of, I mean, is it really the 4th decade, something like that, right? Is that it could still surprise me. And I think that's exactly what's happened, is that we're creating that. The one other thing I'll just share is that we do have a second client that's really close to our heart. So the Bring Our Families Home campaign, it is a nonprofit that was just founded in the last year, but it is families of those that have those that are wrongfully detained. There's about 63 Americans right now who are being wrongfully detained abroad just because they are U.S. citizens. And so we're going to do a brainstorm next week with one of the families who's affected by it. And there's an AU connection. So Imad Shargi, he has been held hostage in Iran for almost 5 years in the notorious Evans prison. His daughter, Hannah, is an AU grad. So she graduated from SIS in, I think, 2017. So she's going to be Zooming in with us. And his sister, Netta, is going to come into the classroom as well. And actually, somebody on ISIS's team, Judith, she's doing her senior capstone on Bring Our Families Home campaign. But that's something where, you know, if SOC3's premise is storytelling can change the world, if we can make any type of impact with the BOFH campaign this semester, it truly will make a difference. So that's, I think, really important for our students.
Powerful. That's super powerful that's, you know, going on, and that's something you guys are involved with. That's amazing.
Yeah, so we'll see. We don't know what the idea is yet, but next week is the brainstorm, so we're hoping.
This is where it all starts, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, we don't know what the idea is, but we're going to go for it, and that's respectable. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for being here. If we'll be including any links, descriptions, anything you want us to include in the description.
Follow us on Instagram, follow us on LinkedIn, visit our website, www.soc3change.com. And then ISIS has actually even been meeting with the web development team. So again, just getting that experience working with vendors, all of that is coming into play.
That's so much experience. Very cool, especially as a senior.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very exciting.
Most definitely.